Hey there guys, welcome back to the channel for another episode of Mortal Realms Monday. This week we are painting the Cairn Wraith from issue 39 of the Mortal Realms magazine. So, to get started, I've gone ahead and assembled the model, leaving off his scythe so that we can just get to the inside and a few areas without that being in the way. And I've gone ahead and primed it with a white primer. I'm now taking some Nighthaunt Gloom and straight from the pot, just applying this all over that sort of ghostly robe area on the bottom. Now this model has the dark hood and then the sort of the ghostly robes. So obviously the top area you can see me leaving there is the hood, and I'm just applying this over all of the bottom area. Now what I'm going to do is apply this 2 or 3 times, try not to let it pool up too much, as we don't want it pooling towards the bottom. We want to try and keep most of this towards the top. So yeah, just 2 or 3 layers and start further up with each layer, and just try to keep this running into those recesses rather than the towards the bottom of the model. And obviously don't forget to do the inside. So I'll get on with this, we'll be back in a bit. So with the Nighthaunt Gloom all done, we can now move on to painting in the hood on top of this guy. So just taking some Abaddon Black and obviously thinned down slightly. I'm now going to add a couple of layers, some nice thin even coats over the top of the hood. He does have a trim area along the hood, which we'll be painting later, so I'll leave that. But his face, for this guy, we had multiple faces. I chose to go with the iron mask, and so I'll be painting that black as well, along with the top portion, the blade part of the scythe. The reason I'll do that whilst it's not attached is it's just easier to hold the scythe by the bottom part and paint that up black. So I'll get on with that, and then we can take the next step. Alright, so next up I'm taking some Corax White and a dry brush, or the makeup brush that I usually use, and I'm just giving this a dry brush over all of that Nighthaunt Gloom area. Very well done off camera. Apologies for that. Now the brush that I'm using, for some reason I cannot shift the yellow staining out of it, and so I am getting this green look that you can see going onto the model here. Obviously you don't want that, and I definitely don't want that, so I actually end up getting rid of this brush and changing to a new one, and then going back all over with Corax White and getting a natural white tone on there. So if you're following along, be sure to do that, and you'll get a nice gradient. Now what I'm doing is focusing this a lot more towards the bottom of the robe, and just a little bit as we get to the top, just making sure to pick off all those edges and those sort of rippled raised areas, and then towards the bottom just getting some of that flat area as well. But I'll get on with this, and in the next step you'll see what it will look like with white. Okay, so now I'm taking some Incubi Darkness and a different brush here. This is the one that I will be using to correct that greenish look and doing it with white. But for now we're just taking the Incubi Darkness and doing the same thing on the black hood portion of this guy. So you can see here, just using the edges, barely any paint on the bristles. I just want enough to give a slightly blue-grey tint to some of those raised folds and stuff within his hood there. Okay, so with the black and the ghostly area now done, I decided for this trim I wanted something with a little bit of colour rather than just bare metal, and so for this I'm just taking some Mephiston Red and applying this all over that white trim. Obviously this is going to take a couple of thinned coats. Obviously I'm painting over white, which isn't too bad, but some of the black and incubi got on there from the dry brushing, and so with just the one coat that's going to show through. So I'll be sure to give it a good 2 or 3 coats. But I'll get on with this and catch you guys in a flash. Okay, so just before I attach this to the Cairn Wraith, I'm taking some Mormfang brown here and just giving this a couple of thin coats up the shaft of the scythe. Obviously being careful not to get it onto his hands or the black that I've already done on the blade itself. So once again, be back in a sec. Okay, so for the hands, I realise these are skeleton hands, but I wanted to keep that ghostly effect that sort of more of my army has. So I'm just taking some Aethermatic blue here and just going over that white, letting it seep into the recesses and staining that white a little bit, just to give it more of a ghostly effect. Obviously if you want these to be bone, then you can go ahead and use your favourite skeleton / bone recipe and obviously make them bone. So I'm just going to apply this over the hands, let them dry, and then I'll glue them onto the model. So I'll catch you guys once that is done. Okay, now that it's attached to the blade, I'm just applying some iron breaker, lead belcher first over the scythe blade and also on his mask. So I'll give this a nice even coat and then let that dry, and we can come back for what will pretty much be some of the finishing touches. Catch you guys in a flash. Okay, so next up is time to oil this guy up. So just taking some of that Nuln oil and applying it over the mask, the top of the wreath blade, also the shaft of this. Now I could have used some Agrax Earthshade or something like that, but for the sake of keeping this to minimum paints so that some of you guys that are new to the hobby can see that you don't need a huge collection of paints, just a few basic ones, and you can pretty much continue this right through your Nighthaunt army with you know, a limited palette. So applying this all over, and also the red trim will give us a nice finish ready to highlight. Okay, so with all the Nuln oil dried, I'm now taking some Evil Sun's Scarlet, and I'm just giving the this band around the hood a very thin edge highlight with the red. That's the Evil Sun's Scarlet. So obviously being careful just to keep this right on the edge, both the outside edge around his face and also the inside edge where it overlaps the hood slightly. And then moving on from this, I'll also take some iron breaker and pick off each of the rivets that go around the trim there, and I'll also use this to edge highlight the scythe on the top of the blade, as well as some of the features on his mask. Nothing overly complicated, just picking out some of those sharper edges. So I'll get on with this, and then we can come back for what will essentially be the final step to this super quick, super easy, tabletop ready Cairn Wraith. Catch you in a bit. Okay, so I'm now taking some Typhus Corrosion and an old beaten up brush here, and just applying this liberally to a few spots along the blade and also on his mask. You can sort of blob this in a few areas, get it a little bit thick on the areas, as when it dries down the paint will almost evaporate thinly and you'll get a nice rough rusty texture there that we can then go over with some visor rust. Obviously if you want more of a clean look, then you can leave this off and your Cairn Wraith is essentially done. aside from a bit of highlighting on the shaft of the blade, which we'll take a look at now. And to do that, all I'm doing is some Scrag Brown, that same brush that I just used for the Typhus Corrosion, cleaned off obviously, and I'm just going backwards and forwards very finely, barely any paint on the brush. I have wiped the excess off, and essentially dry brushing just to pick off some of those edge highlights. If it goes on a little bit too thick, I'm just wiping it with my finger there. It just gives it more of a streaky wood look to it. I'm not going for anything super high quality on this, super detailed, just a nice tabletop ready Wraith. So you can see there I was just dabbing some of the paint off on some paper towel, and again just going along the bottom of the shaft there. Obviously I'm doing this whilst that Typhus Corrosion is drying, and then we can come back and dry brush it with some Riser Rust. So as I said, some Riser Rust, just got a little bit on my paper towel there that I'm using, because that's soaked into the paper towel, and this is obviously a dry paint. Using that same small brush, I'm barely picking up any paint and just going back over those Typhus Corrosion areas. As you can see, you know, this is pretty much dry brushing. Just be careful not to get any thick blobs of paint on your bristles there, and you'll get pretty much the same effect. But what I will do is get a small blob on the bristles every now and then, just to add a little bit of thickness, a little bit more of a brighter orange in a few select areas. But for the most part, we're just looking for a dry brush of orange over those rust areas. So there you have it guys, one super quick, super easy Cairn Wraith at tabletop ready standard. In total, not including the drying time for the Nuln Oil, this took me a little over half an hour to do, and then obviously another 10 minutes for the Nuln Oil, and then obviously the base on top of that. But yeah, still super quick, super easy, and super effective look for tabletop quality. So I hope you enjoyed the video guys. I hope that these videos are useful to you and that you are at least finding inspiration from them. If you're new to the channel, big welcome to you. If you enjoyed the video, hit that thumbs up button. If you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button. And until next time guys, take it easy and keep painting those minis.